Perfect. Okay, well, the first order of business here, this is a 2010 GT3 RS. So it's got a little bit more front tire than the standard GT3, which means it's going to have tons of front grip, which is great, just like our race cars. We've been doing that in Grand Am since '05. We've almost come to the point of putting more front rubber in than rear rubber. That way we can really stand on the car going up into the corner. And you can take advantage of the rear engine by putting tons of front Swaybar in it to really get good power down out of the corner. That way you really get both things. Typically, if you didn't have enough front tire with a lot of front bar for rear grip, you'll get tremendous understeer or the car will get too tight. And there's always a balancing act, but by putting more front tire in, the car will be less tight and you'll have much more braking ability going up into the corner. So first thing I did was just walk around the car, do a quick survey. First thing I check when I'm looking at a GT3, whether I'm at the track or on the street, is I see the Swaybar location, get a quick eyeball of the camber of the car, so I've got a read of what the car is going to do for me right away. This car from the factory is set up a bit on the loose side, especially for having this much front tire. Rear bars in the middle and the front bars darn near full soft, so this car is set up for darn near being a drift car, so probably not too friendly for the customer. We'll probably end up dropping the ride height in the rear, put a bunch more front bar in it, add a little camber to the front to balance it out, and just keep enough rear bar in it to hold it up. It'll be a spectacular car when we're finished.
Mike, why don't you talk about this this spring and sway bar package that we've been putting on a lot of cars recently?
Well, Casey, that really goes back to what I'm discussing. You really need a bunch of front bar in these cars to make them work. Our bar is can go as high as 40% greater than this GT3 front bar. The rear bar is fairly similar. It might only have about a 10% rate change, but the location of the adjusting holes make it a little more accurate to tune. This one's a bit coarse. There's only 3 position, and the rear bar is very delicate. You want just enough to hold it up and get a good corner exit and not have a corner exit oversteer. And the 3 holes really, it's tough. It's hit and miss. You need really another position, because a lot of times we even tune the rear bar in between holes. You'll do like maybe one from full soft on one side and full soft on the other to get right in between, so you're only splitting like, let's say, a 10-pound split on the bar. So that's the reason our rear bar is so important. Brilliant power delivery on this RS. The initial feel is, yeah, the car wants to be loose. You can tell right away. I'm sure on real hard braking, the rear car is going to move around. I'll put the shock into the sports
the windows up too, so we can hear each other. I got that.
Yeah, we'll turn a little AC on here.
Now, Mike, we're also changing this the front spring rate when we do this package. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, along with the sway bar change?
Well, that really goes right back with what I was talking about leaning on the front of the car, especially with this RS package having this much front tire. You need a lot of front spring in the car to get the power down in the rear. You also need a lot of spring in the front spring in the car, because we're going to load these front uprights so hard. It's just unbelievable. On this GT3 RS, it has the same front uprights as a GT3, which is the same as our factory race car. The upright takes so much stress that they literally have 2 pinch bolts on this late design.
Feels easy 40 horsepower over the first gen car.
Oh,
easy.
Yeah. Tell you what, when this baby gets over $7 grand, it really howls pretty hard. I think that's when that exhaust cam fully retards. I think that has kind of a switch. The intake cam is 40 degrees movement. It's pretty brilliant. It's got a better power curve than a race car. Yeah, the race car doesn't have near the torque at 4 or 5 grand, because the cams are just pinned in a fixed position. Usually we run them like 5 degrees on the intake and 15 on the exhaust. definitely needs some setup work. It's not horrendously bad, but it would definitely bite you in the butt if you weren't on top of this car. And it's really lacking entry speed is what's really killing the car. If we were at a race circuit, it would be cutting our entry mile an hour down by probably 3 to 5 miles an hour.
Now from, let's just say, the way that we've driven it currently in its current state from the factory, you know, give me a rough estimate of like a VIR lap time.
Well, it's got a lot of power, so that's going to equate to something there. Apparently, it would probably run in the 204s, right around there. Might touch it. It would be tough, I think, to get a 203, just because I think it would be way too loose up the S's, and that's where you're going to need to make your times. I'm going to call it to be a 204s. I think when it's finally dialed in properly, I think it should be capable of running 59s up there for sure. And that's on the same rubber. I think if we had some real rubber on it, we'd probably be able to get some 57s out of it. Maybe even some 56s.
Yeah, real squirrely under braking.
Oh yeah, that's because it's so loose. Heck, it's loose anytime. The rear car's not set up properly. It's you can definitely drift this car around. This is a drift car. This is the opposite of a road race car. What we find and what happens at TPC is that typically we get a tremendous amount of GT3s, as you can see. We get we're probably coming 4 or 5 a weekend for tuning, chassis tuning. And the reason is that you're usually better off leaving these completely alone from the dealer unless they're tuned by someone that has the type of knowledge that we have. The problem is that the engineers that have the knowledge that we do from the race circuit really aren't involved in the retail or aftermarket. They're really only for hire for factory race teams.
Right.
So it's a very unusual situation. I think the worst thing you can do to these cars is we see them all the time. They'll go to tuning shops and they'll add more front camber, which is the kiss of death. That's the reason these get wrecked so much. The guys add even more front grip. And this car is all about rear grip. It's all about corner exit. And the more you work on corner exit, the more you'll get corner entry, because they work together, because it's a rear engine car and you got to think that way. But you got to keep the roll center coupled so you can really get it up into the corner, because you got to carry a lot of speed to the corner. That's why it's critical to get enough bar into it, and it's critical to then balance it out with the camber setting. It's a critical situation. I would say anybody that has a GT3, we're glad to help you with advice or your shop as far as settings. It's a good place to start getting good information, reliable information. You won't find it on the internet. You won't find any top engineers with race cars on any forums doing any blogs. It just doesn't work that way.
Thanks, Mike.
My pleasure.